Today in this video we are going to discuss Article 4 of URC 522, which is on collection instructions. Now before we get into this article in detail, let me first explain what collection instruction is. This term can be a little bit new to you, or you might not understand it if you are not worked in the international trade area. Now collection instruction is one of the documents that comes with the collection. Now in this document, it is required to mention all instructions according to which the collecting or the presenting bank must act. It's like the one document where all the instructions are mentioned, so that the banks don't have to refer or look at other accompanying documents for instructions. All those are just in one place called collection instructions. Now since it is so important, one document having all the instructions, it is mandated that all collections must have a separate collection instructions attached with it. So you have to remember that it is a must to include collection instruction in all collections. You cannot exempt this document from any collections. So with that understanding, let's get into the article. First we are going to look at subsection A. Subsection A says all documents sent for collection must be accompanied by a collection instruction, indicating that the collection is subject to URC 522 and giving complete and precise instructions. Banks are only permitted to act upon the instructions given in such collection instruction and in accordance with these rules. Next, banks will not examine documents in order to obtain instructions. Third one, unless otherwise authorized in the collection instruction, banks will disregard any instructions from any party or bank other than the party or bank from whom they receive the collection. Now we first went through subsection A. Now let's get the key points from this subsection. Now this subsection A tells us the importance of collection instruction. It says that all documents sent for collection must accompany collection instruction. So there itself you can understand that this document is an important document. You cannot disregard it. You cannot say that you can exclude this and send the collection. You have to include this in the collections that you send. And the next important thing, so this is the first thing we understand from here, and the next thing that you understand is that the instructions in these collection instructions should have two main things. What are the two main things? It should say that collection is subject to URC 522. So this has to be included in the collection instructions. Remember in the article 1 we read that for a collection to be handled according to this rule, it needs to explicitly say that it is subject to URC 522. And not only that, the instructions that are mentioned on this collection instruction, other than it being subject to URC 522, must give complete and precise instructions. You cannot give vague or instructions that are not complete. It needs to be complete and precise. So the two characteristics they want in the instruction is for it to be complete and for it to be on point or precise. And another thing that you need to know is that this instruction as well as URC 522 are the only two instructions according to which the banks will work. So for the banks, they will get instructions from two things. What are the two things? One is collection instruction, other is URC 522. So only these two documents are permitted to give instruction to the banks, and banks are also permitted to act only on these two instructions. Banks are not supposed to examine any other document to get instructions. So they should only see these two, collection instruction and URC 522, for it to act according to the instructions mentioned, and no other documents can stipulate instructions, or the banks either shouldn't examine those documents looking for instructions. Now, if subjectively in some event, let's say that instruction has to be told from another party or from another bank, that must be clearly mentioned in the collection instruction. You need to say that, look here, this party or this bank is also authorized to give you instruction. If that is not mentioned, if that clause is not mentioned, the only entity that can give you instruction without explicit authorization in the collection instruction is the party or the bank from whom the collection was received. Now this is very, very important. You have to remember, the person who has the right to give you instructions, even though it's explicitly or not mentioned, is that person who has sent you that collection, from whom you received that collection. From that particular party or the bank, you can get any instruction and act according to that. But if you're acting or getting instruction from any other party or bank, then that has to be mentioned or authorized in the collection instructions. Only then you can act according to that. If not, it's only the collection instruction and the rules mentioned in this URC 522. Now let's move to section B of Article 4. Now section B of Article 4 is very, very important, because this is going to tell you the contents that needs to be mentioned in this collection instruction. What kind of information are you going to include here? That is given in this subsection B. Now you need to know, this subsection B says that, look here, there are 11 information as well as terms that needs to be mentioned in collection instructions. So know this, there are 11 terms and information that needs to be mentioned in the collection instruction. All these 11 are stipulated in subsection B. Now let's get into each of them. The first one says, details of the bank from which the collection was received, including full name, postal and SWIFT address, telex, telephone, facsimile and reference. Next, detail of the principal, including full name, postal address and, if applicable, telex, telephone and facsimile. Third, details of the drawee, including full name, postal address or the domicile at which presentation is to be made, and if applicable, telex, telephone and facsimile. Now, looking at this, what can you understand? Now, first we went through the under subsection B, we went through 1, 2 and 3. You can even go through the fourth one, that will be easier as well. Fourth one is also talking about a bank. It says details of the presenting bank, if any, including full name, postal address and, if applicable, telex, telephone and facsimile. So Only in case if there is a presenting bank, yes, you have to mention these details of the presenting bank as well. Now, looking at the first four, there are certain things that we can understand. Now, who are the parties? The details relating to which parties should be elaborated in the collection instructions. You need to have details of the bank from which the collection was received. You need to have the details of the principal. You need to have the details of the drawee. And if there is a if in case there is a presenting bank, then details of that presenting bank should also be included. So, who are the four parties, or which four parties details must be included? Banks from whom the collection is received, principal, drawee and presenting bank. Now, moving on to the type of information or the type of details that you have to mention. Now, you can see three types of information is very common. You have to include that for all the four parties. What are those information? You have to mention the full name. You have to mention the postal address. And you have to mention telex, telephone, facsimile numbers. Now, these three are must. You can see even in principal, full name, postal address and the telex, telephone, facsimile. Drawee also, full name, postal address, telex, telephone and facsimile. Again, when we move to presenting bank, full name, postal address, telex, telephone and facsimile. So, these three are the common pieces of information that you have to include for all the four parties. But apart from that, there are certain unique information. What are those unique details? What are those unique information? And to which party you should include them? Now, if you take or if you are trying to give the details of bank from which the collection was received, you will give the common info like the full name, the postal address, telex, telephone and the facsimile numbers. Apart from that, you will give some unique information such as the SWIFT address and the reference. So, this will now tell you that look here, apart from the common details, there are certain unique ones that you need to say SWIFT and reference. What about for principal? For principal, all the three common details is enough. Again, even for presenting bank, that was the same. Just the basic info including mentioning the three is enough. But for the drawee again, you see a similar unique information that needs to come. Yes, you have to give full name, postal address, telex, telephone and facsimile numbers. But apart from the postal address, you should also mention the domicile at which presentation is to be made. Now, this has to be included in the details of the drawee. So, if you can highlight that as well, that's another unique information that needs to be mentioned. Moving on, fifth one says the collection instruction should mention the amount of collection and the currency in which it needs to be collected as well. Then it needs to include the list of documents enclosed and the numerical count of each document as well. So, here you need to know in terms of documents, if they ask in terms of documents in the collection instructions, what are the info that needs to be mentioned? You have to give the list of the documents and you also have to give the numerical count of each of documents. Now, for example, if you had included invoice, bill of lading, all those, you have to mention the list of documents that you have included and against that you have to say how many copies that you have included in the collection as well. With regarding to the amount, what you need to mention, you have to say amount that needs to be collected, as well as in what currency are you going to collect. The seventh requirement is that the collection instructions should say the terms and conditions upon which the payment has to be accepted or obtained, or acceptance need to be obtained. And let's say it's, you have to just give the delivery of documents, then in what terms the delivery of documents need to be paid or made, if it's against payment or acceptance, or if it's against any other terms and conditions. Here again it says that it is the responsibility of the party preparing the collection instruction to ensure that the terms for the delivery of documents are clearly and unambiguously stated. Otherwise, banks will not be responsible for any consequences arising from them. So the person who is drafting the collection instruction should clearly say that, look here, if there is a delivery of document, is it going to be occurred according to payment, or is it going to be occurred according to acceptance, or is it going to be occurred according to other terms and conditions. So this has to be clearly mentioned, and whose responsibility is that? The party preparing the collection instruction. And are the other banks liable for any consequences arising due to not mentioning this information? No, they are not responsible. Eighth one goes on to talk about the charges which are need to be collected. Now when we are going to talk about charges, you have to mention whether it can be waived or not. And next we have relating to interest. If interest has to be collected, then you have to mention whether it can be waived or not, whether what interest rate you will have to use if you are collecting the interest, what interest period are you going to cover, like after which date and until when are you going to charge interest, and finally the basis of calculation, especially the day count. Now for a year, how many days would you assume if you are calculating the interest? Now a lot of the students don't understand when they read the URC, but indirectly with regarding to charges, you just have to mention what are the charges that needs to be collected and whether it can be waived or not. So just the two pieces of information. But regarding interest, you have to mention 4 pieces of information. You have to say, technically you have to mention whether interest applies or not, and if it applies, you have to mention 4 things: whether it can be waived or not, and thereafter the interest rate, thereafter the interest period, thereafter the basis of calculating the interest. So remember these 4 information with regarding to interest that needs to be included in collection instruction. The 10th piece of information is the method of payment and the form in which the payment advice needs to be given, and finally how they need to act in case of a non-payment, non-acceptance or a non-compliance with any other instructions. These needs to be stipulated in the collection instructions, and these are the 11 pieces of terms and information. Then we move on to the final subsection of Article 4, which is Article or subsection C. The subsection C says, collection instructions should bear the complete address of the drawee or of the domicile at which the presentation is to be made. So remember in B, when we talked about drawee, it said postal address or domicile at which presentation is to be made. So this postal address or the domicile that you are mentioning must be the complete address. Why? This is the most important piece of information. Only from the drawee you are going to collect the money. So if you don't know where he is or where the presentation is to be made, there is a huge question about collecting the money. So here the collection instructions, when it being sent, you need to mention the complete address of the drawee, or in other words you have to give the complete domicile at which the presentation is to be made. If this address is either incomplete or incorrect, let's say you have not given the full address, you have stopped it halfway without mentioning the city or the province, or let's say you've got the address completely wrong, then the party who got the collection instruction, who is that? The collecting bank. They are not liable or responsible for any action that they may take to actually find out the correct address. And also they are not liable for any resulting delays that is happening until they find the correct or the complete address. So again, giving the complete address of the drawee or of the domicile in which presentation is to be made is the responsibility of the party preparing the collection instruction. The collecting bank has no liability or responsibility to find the correct address, or if there is any delay in finding that address, they are also not responsible for that. So here in this article 4, in two places they are referring about responsibility of party preparing the collection instruction. And what were these two responsibility? One responsibility says that they need to explicitly mention in what terms the delivery of documents need to be done, whether payment, acceptance or other terms and conditions. The next responsibility is to mention the complete address of the drawee or the domicile at which the presentation is to be made. I hope this video was informative to you and we were able to decode article 4 very clearly for you. Make sure you write what we understood from these articles separately, so that when you read this article again at a later time, you should be able to find out these finer points. I hope this video was helpful to you. Thank you for listening and subscribe and support us for more videos.